Hello, and welcome to the User Research Strategist podcast. I am your host, Nikki Anderson, and I am joined today by the wonderful Javier Bargas. Hi, Javier.
Hello, Vicky.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm super excited to talk about our topic, which we will reveal in 1 second. But before we get to that, do you mind just giving a quick introduction to the audience?
Sure, and thanks for having me, Nikki. My name is Javier. I work at Google. I'm a UX research director. Spent the last almost 14 years building and scaling research teams at Google in different settings, different products. And next to that, I'm also like a coach. I coach UXers and train. I give talks, I teach, and I'm also a passionate woodworker.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I
Oh,
do.
cool.
Do you need a table? I can make you one.
Oh, you can make tables?
Yes, absolutely. And I ship them internationally. I even have an Etsy store.
Do you really?
I do, yeah.
Oh my God, that's so cool. How long have you been doing that for?
Yeah, for about 8 years now. When I started to manage full time and I stopped doing research, I became very frustrated because the only thing I did all day is sending out emails and having meetings. And so I wanted to do something with my hands, something I can actually look at. And so I learned everything from YouTube.
So you're a self-taught YouTube woodworker.
Yes. And I also have a YouTube channel showing how to do
Okay,
stuff. So
amazing.
I
I
give
was just
back. I
gonna
give
ask.
back.
I was just gonna ask, and what is your new YouTube channel on woodworking? Oh, how cool. Okay, we might have to also put that into the show notes because that is just like really awesome. And I'm gonna check out your Etsy store.
Thank you.
Amazing. Well, okay, we got sidetracked there. So sorry, everybody.
That
We're
happened a couple times.
yeah. We were discussing earlier that we both like to wing things. So
That's
that's
right.
how it goes. So getting back into the user research space, as much as I'd love to talk about tables because I need a new desk, let's talk about our topic today, which is strategic versus tactical impact.
Yes.
And just to start us off, because there are 50 ways to define everything these days, do you mind just giving your definition for what strategic impact means versus what tactical impact means?
Yes, sure. The way I like to explain it is that maybe overly simplified, but it's a way that like it sticks, is strategic impact means you're figuring out, you're influencing what will be built, while tactical impact is how it will be built. And so with those words, it's maybe easier to understand that in one area you're helping the company figuring out which direction to go, and then with the other research, you're helping them to figure out how to build it.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess oversimplification sometimes really make it easier to
Yeah.
understand. So, yeah, the what
These
versus
things are obviously connected, right? They're connected. They're not completely separate,
yep,
right? That's
yep.
why it's overly simplified, but I think it helps.
Yeah, and actually that was my next question because we had said strategic versus, right? So
Yeah.
almost putting them opposing each other versus the strategic and. So I'm wondering, are they versus or are they ands?
They are clearly ants. There's no way to separate those things. The reason why sometimes people say versus is because typically when you start your research career, you are focused more on the how, on the tactical side of research. And then as you become more senior, you will be involved more in strategic questions and helping the company decide which direction to go. So you're expected to have more strategic influence, and that's why sometimes researchers almost put them as contrary sides. It's like, no, like I won't do this because it's tactical. I have to work on strategic research, and that's why sometimes they're like almost put as things that are opposing each other, but they're not. They're like very close. They're like sister and brother, and very often when you do research, you will come up with insights that help you to either like decide in which direction to go, so strategic, or how to do things, and from the same research, right?
Mhm.
So it's the insights that then will define how they influence product.
And I completely understand when I was moving or trying to move out of the tactical space, I got so stubborn because I was like, I'm so sick of doing usability tests, as helpful as they are, as necessary as they are, that I was like, I don't want to do tactical work anymore. I just want to do strategic work. So I can understand where the verses was born and how that comes about, because I think we get locked into either doing one or the other.
Yes, that's one thing. But the other thing, I mean, I work with many researchers who basically said what you just said,
Yeah.
which is typically when I go like, stop being a baby. I'm sorry.
Yep.
Um,
Nope. 100% agree.
and but the thing is also because we researchers defined our ladders, right, where we describe seniority, and there we have it in there that you obviously you have more strategic influence, and then some researchers interpret that as like, well, now that I'm senior, I'm only allowed to work on strategy, but a product team has different needs and different stages of product development, right?
Yeah.
How can you only work on strategy? Like you will have phases, important phases where you actually will have to put the strategy on the ground and make it and make it happen. And as a researcher, you want to be part of that too. You cannot only, oh, I'm the one who will set direction, then I'm off doing something else fancy. You want to be part of the entire process. So naturally, you will work on strategy and on tactics, and you will need to give to the team what they need at that moment. And so that's why fixating only on one is not going to be helpful.
Do you want to get all of your user research questions answered, all while hanging out on your couch in sweatpants? No need to join any live webinars and hope that your question gets answered. No need to Google a million different things and sift through some scattered advice that you don't really know is valid or reliable. Not anymore. I know it sounds too good to be true, but I promise it isn't, because if you become a paid Substack subscriber, you get access immediately to a community filled with user researchers that I am in every single day answering questions. Not only can you hang out on your couch, feel less alone as a user researcher, and get all of your questions answered, not only by an expert, but by a bunch of other user researchers with amazing perspectives and experience, you can do all of that on your couch in sweatpants, and I will be alongside there with you every step of the way. So join my paid Substack, get immediate access, and we can relax together solving all of your user research problems. See you there.
I remember getting stuck in a strategic loop, which over and over again, I was like pulled into strategic research, and then the tactical side got put onto somebody else who was more junior than I was. And I remember being like, when somebody came up to me and was like, "Hey, do you want to do a usability test?" I was like, "Yes,
Finally.
please." Please. So I'm wondering, in your based on your thoughts, how do we sit in both sides of strategic and tactical research without, I guess, getting stuck in one or the other? Are there some ways that
Yeah.
we can make sure we're like going in and out of both?
I think the most important realization for people is to stop saying strategic or tactical research,
Okay.
because it's not strategic or tactical research, it's strategic or tactical insights. The problem is that researchers have started attaching research methods to type of research. I give an example, right? If you so you said it before, right? A usability study is tactical. By nature, it will yield more tactical insights, but you can generate strategic insights from a usability study, because if something might happen in those tests where suddenly you have a realization about something that needs to change fundamentally in the product, and that strategy, it's not how, it's in which direction to go. And and the same is, and for strategic, people go like, well, a field study, an ethnographic study, a diary study, that's strategic. And it's not true, because those insights, if they impact strategy, they were strategic in nature. If you generate insights that are strategic in nature and nothing happens with them, they were not strategic. They were a waste of money. And you can also generate tactical insights from a field study where you see how people are using your product. Suddenly you have a realization about something you need to change in the how, and not in which direction to go. And that means if we get it out of our heads that methods are either strategic or tactical, we win. Because stakeholders, they don't think that way. There's no PM who will go like, oh, this research method is strategic or tactical. They look at the insights. If an insight helped them to decide which direction to go, it's strategic, and else it's tactical, right? So they shouldn't be asking you to do a field study or anything like that, right? But they might reveal the problems that they have, and you can help them solve them. And sometimes one or the other method will be more likely revealing those insights. And so if we let go of that and say, like, okay, we are always open to strategic and tactical insights, no matter which method we use, we have already an open mindset, right? And for instance, in the past, I've often advised my researchers when they were embarking into a more strategic effort, like foundational effort, field studies, that stuff. I was always saying, like, build in things that generate tactical insights, because those you can deliver quickly. And then you come back with all the data, you deliver some quick wins. The team is excited, they can implement it while you work on the analysis of all the other data, and you try to come up with strategic insights that will help the team too.
Yeah, that's such a great piece of advice because it can take longer to generate and go through that more strategic information. And if you are
Yes.
delivering things while you're doing that, you become more, embedded in their
Yeah.
process. You're helping them make decisions. And so I'm curious, you talked about strategic being the what, the direction, tactical being the how. If you're somebody who's not really thought about strategic versus tactical insights, so instead of methods, instead of approaches, how might you tell the difference between a strategic insight and a tactical insight?
If you're not accustomed to it, well, I think
Yeah.
I think you should. If you have an insight, you can just ask yourself the question: is that helping us to define how we build something, or is it helping us to decide in which direction to go, right? Like from a roadmap perspective, making a new feature, going in a different direction, creating a new product, or deprecating, like stop to go in a certain direction, these kind of things. So if you look at the inside and you ask yourself, what will this help us? Like which problem will it solve? You might be very close to actually the how or the what. And if you're not, if it's hard to say, then maybe it's an insight that actually helps with both, which is fine too. It's not a bad thing if you actually have an insight that helps you with either, like, here we need to change direction and to do it differently.
So you can kind of have this hybrid insight, which to me sounds like gold.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think it's very frequent, but
Yeah.
I've certainly seen it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that what you said earlier is you talk about how in strategic kind of efforts, let's say, you can still find tactical
Yeah.
insights and vice versa. With a usability test, you can find strategic information and strategic insights. And I'm wondering, because I know that a lot of people get stuck repeating the same methods and then getting similar outcomes. And I struggled a lot with usability tests, maybe only scratching the surface of
Mhm.
what they could be. So, do you have any tips for people who are maybe looking to broaden their scope of how they do usability tests so maybe they can get some of those
Mhm.
strategic insights? Or is it a natural thing? And maybe there's nothing we can do. We could just hope for them to come.
Well, I do think if so, first of all, it's important for researchers to have a broad method tool set, right? So if you're somebody who has spent most of your time doing usability tests, you will have a tendency to use that method over and over again. So there's this saying, right? Like if you're a hammer, every problem looks like a nail, right? And so that's why sometimes I ask people in interviews, or like, which is your favorite method? And I want them to tell me, I have no favorite method,
Yeah.
right? I will pick the method that is the best method for the problem at hand. But very often they pick one. So you shouldn't have that. And if you feel you don't know about enough methods, you should learn. Like there's books about different research methods that will just broaden your horizon about things you can do when you have a certain problem. So you don't always pick the same method. Because depending on which method you pick, you will have a tendency to generate more tactical or more strategic insights. Like even if that's not, I'm saying like there's not strategic research, right? But yes, some methods are more prone to uncover tactical or strategic insights. if you are stuck in a place where you have to do a lot of lab studies, but you want to increase the output of strategic insights, I recommend adding that in. Like, you always have an intro phase when you speak with people, you introduce the things, right? And you ask them about how they use the products and so on. You do a warm-up phase, right? And that is a very valuable time where you can actually integrate questions that are more about like the needs, the fundamental problems that people have, the pain points, things that will help you uncover strategic insights that will help you to shape the direction. And so it's typically in those conversations where things come up, plus when they do things in your interface, in your prototype or whatever, and you have conversations with them about what they do, there's also opportunities where you can bring it to a higher level, the discussion, right? So instead of talking about the button placement or the label, right? Because you realize there's something fundamentally different to what you actually are expecting, you can try to bring the conversation to a higher level and to tease out those insights.
I love that squeaking that stuff into the warm up and intro phase.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great time to do it. And I'm wondering if would the same thing apply the other way around? So I know people who are stuck. I mean, I got stuck in a strategic loop, but I know there are some researchers who have only done more strategic efforts and done like bigger foundational studies and haven't done usability testing. I've met
Yeah.
quite a few, especially recently. And so would it work the other way around of like somehow trying to get tactical information into a strategic setting?
I think it absolutely does. Like,
Yeah.
we had, for instance, field studies in Asia where we went and like talked with people about very like fundamental aspects of gaming, for instance.
Mm.
But we also had them actually game and show them how they do stuff. In other settings, we even brought in prototypes about certain ideas. And after like the more foundational conversations, we had them try out stuff. Yeah, you can totally combine that. I don't think it's an issue. And as I mentioned before, it's even an advantage because you can these insights you can bring in more quickly to the team. They're more actionable. Typically, tactical insights are more actionable, more quickly actionable than strategic ones. So you can bring in value very quickly while you're still working on the more fundamental things.
Hey everyone, I have been taking some business courses recently and I am launching a new membership that's all about how user researchers can become more business savvy, more strategic, and more of a business partner in their organizations. One of the biggest questions that I get asked is, hey, my organization isn't really mature. It has like a low user research maturity level. Please do not let the maturity of your organization dictate your user research career. That's what I did because I was in a lower user research maturity, I kind of let myself stagnate and I didn't really learn new things. And with that, my skills kind of like deteriorated. I lost a lot of time that I could have used to learn really, really important skills because they weren't necessarily applicable to my organization at that time. But guess what? I got fired. And then it didn't really matter what maturity level my organization was at because I was no longer there. And I wished that I had taken the time to learn some of these skills because they would have been applicable at the next places that I went into. I know that it can be hard sometimes and frustrating when you're in a low maturity organization and you want to push things, you want to learn new things, but please, please, please don't let your current organization and their levels of maturity impact your future career because I promise you, you will not be there forever and you will need the skills that you need to learn in the future. Promise, 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 especially with the user research industry changing and us hopefully moving into that more strategic space and operating more as business partners and innovation partners to our organizations. Also, if you want more details on my membership and how to become a little bit more business oriented as a researcher, check out the link that I have. And I hope that helps.
Oh gosh, I wish I could do work on gaming. I would
Why
love
don't you? Why don't you work on it?
because I live in Jersey and nobody does that. It's all financial stuff. It's not even I was going to say it's fintech, but it's not tech. It's just lawyers, financial.
Yes, well, maybe you're in the wrong location for
Yes.
gaming. That's true.
Yeah,
That's
I
true.
think so.
You
I
need
think
to move to South Korea. There's a lot of
yeah.
gaming there.
I think I would just quit and become a gamer. So I don't think that would go over very well for me.
I would love to see you as a gamer.
It's just about as graceful as my stretching routine, which is not very graceful.
I have no opinion about that. That's a slippery slope. I'm not going to comment.
Amazing. So actually what you just said was quite interesting of the tactical insights being a bit more actionable or easily actionable than strategic ones. And
Yes.
I know a lot of people might struggle with creating actionable strategic insights. So do you have any tips for people who are looking to try and make their strategic insights more actionable for stakeholders?
Well, yes. I think fundamentally there is a problem on when researchers think that their work is done. Which is like very often, like we have been trained that we plan research, we conduct, we analyze, and we report it. That's our job. That's when the job is done, right? You publish the paper, your job is done. But in reality, in the industry, that's not when your job should be done, because now that you have the insights, something needs to happen with them. And if nothing happens with them, you're not successful.
Yeah.
So if you do strategic research and you have strategic insights about something that needs to change in the roadmap, right? You go and present that in front of the PM, the director, the VP, whatever, and everybody goes like nods and go like, oh, that's interesting. Yes, yes, you're right. You walk out the room and you think your job is done, and then nothing happens with it. That's because you stopped your job too early, right? Your job is only done once this is on the roadmap. Ideally, you'll continue to be part of that, even into the tactical things. But you need to make sure that this moves into the roadmap, which means you need to be there when the strategic conversations happen, when the strategic planning happens, right? Because that's the thing with the strategic insights. If this changes the direction we go, it's not going to have that quickly the impact because the team is working on something. It will impact the future, and that takes more time. So you need to be there in the conversations when strategy is defined. So, for instance, something I've done in the past with teams, it's like when we know when strategic, like the yearly planning happens, which for whatever reason, I don't know, makes no sense. But in many companies, at towards the end of the year, you do yearly planning, and so you set the strategy for the next year because apparently that's a good entity. And so we know this happens sometimes in September, October, where teams will work on this. So research before that puts together strategic primers. It's like insights, all the insights we gathered throughout the year, not only ourselves, but also from the industry, bot reports, everything that you know, you put it into such a primer that the team can use to work on strategy. And as researchers, you now work with your PM, with your counterparts, right, on influencing that strategy. When you define in which direction you go, you come up with all your magic insights. You go like, remember, we found out this. Remember, we should do that, right? And only once that moves into strategy and there's actually a team assigned to do something or stop doing something, that's when you had the impact, right? And so typically when I see researchers struggle to really influence strategy with their work, it's not that the insights are not of high quality or that they're not valid. It's that nobody uses them because the researchers already run off to work on the next fancy, shiny research and is not part of those conversations where it matters.
Awesome. Wow, that was amazing. That was just such a nugget right there. So thank you for sharing that. And I loved what you said. You call them insight primers,
Strategic primers, yes,
strategic
yes.
primers.
Yeah, yeah. It's
That's
not
really,
something I came up with, by the way. It's a researcher in my team who came up with that, and I think it's awesome. So,
yeah,
Jan, if you're listening, you're amazing.
I agree because that's awesome. So strategic primers are essentially, hey, here are the big things that we learned and that we know from this past year.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay.
Ideally with concrete recommendations and how it should impact the strategy. In some cases, it can even be with explorations together with design, right? You can do sprints, like you can do like early ideation of what this could be, because the more concrete it is, the more easy it is to then move into the roadmap.
Especially, I guess people need to figure out when that strategic planning happens, if it's on a continuous basis, if it's on a yearly basis, quarterly basis, and then come to the team with what they've learned in whatever time period to help influence that strategy.
Yes. And if you don't know when that strategic planning happens, you have a fundamental problem, right? In that moment, that means you as a researcher, you're not part of that.
Yes.
You're basically almost like a service org
Yeah.
that is working on like delivering some insights, but you're not part of those conversations. And that is a problem because UX, like if we talk about three-legged stool, like PM and UX, right? All of them need to be part of those conversations. UX being design, research, and the other disciplines, right?
Yeah.
And so if you as a researcher don't know when the strategic planning happens, that should be a big red flag to you. Not only should you figure out when it happens, you should also figure out how to get in there, how to be helpful, how to earn that seat at the table.
That was my next question, is if there is somebody who's struggling with, hey, I actually don't know when this is happening, or I haven't been invited, or I'm not really sure. Is there anything that you have to share that might help them get into that space, get into those conversations?
This is a problem that happens regularly also at Google, right? Where like they're like researchers or UXers, not only researchers, also designers are not invited into those conversations. And typically I take this as a sign that UX has not earned the seat at the table. Sometimes people come and go like, I don't have a seat at the table. And it sounds almost like, well, they have a right to the seat at the table and they're not invited.
Yeah.
But what I have seen is that UXers are always invited if they deliver value, right? If a PM realizes if I have my UX folks in those conversations, the strategy is better, the outcome is better, the direction is better, then those people are invited. And even if there is a huge level gap, I had places where the conversations were all directors, and I had like a staff researcher there, and they were always invited. They were always asked, like because they knew that this researcher was delivering value. And and so if you're not there, it means you have not figured out how to deliver that value. So you need to work with your PMs to figure out what are the main problems, the most important problems, deliver answers to them, deliver value, right? And these are the moments where you can ask, like, can I be part of this conversation? Can we come to this meeting, right? Can you invite me to strategy? Or like, I can help you to work on your PRD if you work on the next PRD, because I can toss in the right insights. All these things can help you to earn that seat at the table. But you need to work, like, you will not be given that seat just because you want it.
Yeah. Just because you feel as though you should be there, just because you think it might be helpful. It's about delivering that value and really understanding, because value is subjective depending on your organization, your teammates, etc. So understanding what value means to them.
Correct. Absolutely. Yes. That's why I say like figuring out their main problems. If you deliver answers to their main problems,
Yeah.
right, you will get that seat.
Yeah. Everybody's happy when they get their problems solved. I mean, I am too. So I understand completely.
It just never happens, right?
No, yeah. I'm still waiting. Amazing. Well, actually, I think that's a perfect place for us to stop today because we're just about at our time. So thank you so much. But before we do say goodbye, do you have one piece of advice based on this conversation or the topic in general that you would impart your wisdom on the audience with?
Yes, I think as a researcher, it's helpful if you stop thinking in strategic or tactical research and you focus on problems. If you understand the main problems that the team is facing, users are facing, the answers that will help them to unlock, and in a second step, you think about, well, which methods will help me generate those insights that will answer those problems, then you're letting go of those handcuffs that we have put on ourselves by using strategic and tactical as a way to say junior and senior. It is not a way to say junior and senior, right? Like successful researchers, they figure out how to deliver value, which can be tactical or strategic. It doesn't matter. So focus on the problems, and then later on, everything will come into place.
Oh, that's perfect. That's what we're meant to do as researchers, focus on those problems.
And that's our jobs. Yes, exactly.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Javier. That was such a fun, great conversation filled with so much amazingness. So I'm sure the audience will have so many different takeaways. So thank you so much for taking the time and sharing.
Thanks, Nikki, for having me. It was a pleasure, and it's always a pleasure to meeting you.
Amazing. Thank you so much to everybody who listened today, and we'll talk soon. Bye.